You know, they say that the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most. I never really understood what that meant until the day I came home early and found my entire life scattered across my front yard like garbage. Let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here, standing in my own driveway, staring at my wedding photos lying face down in the dirt, my late husband's shirts tangled in the rosebushes I'd planted with my own hands 20 years ago. Let me tell you about the moment my heart shattered into so many pieces I didn't think I'd ever find them all. I'd been gone for 3 weeks. 3 weeks caring for my sister Janet who'd had a stroke. 3 weeks sleeping on a hospital chair that felt like concrete, holding her hand through the worst days of her life, praying she'd pull through. 3 weeks of hospital coffee and vending machine dinners and fear that wrapped around my chest so tight I could barely breathe. But Janet needed me. She's my baby sister, the only family I have left besides my son. So I went. I dropped everything and I went, because that's what you do for your family. That's what I thought family meant. Before I left, I sat my son David down in the kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd fed him breakfast every morning for 18 years. The same kitchen where I'd nursed him through stomach bugs and heartbreaks and helped him with homework at that old wooden table. I looked him in the eye and I said, "David, I need you to take care of the house while I'm gone. Your aunt needs me right now. Can I count on you?" And he hugged me. He actually hugged me and said, "Of course, Mom. Don't worry about anything here. Just take care of Aunt Janet. We've got this." We. He said we. Him and that woman he married. Jessica. The daughter-in-law from hell herself. I should have known better. God, I should have seen it coming. But you don't want to believe that your own child, the baby you carried for 9 months, the toddler whose scraped knees you kissed, the teenager whose tears you dried, you don't want to believe they'd betray you like this. So I trusted him. I left my house in his hands and I drove 4 hours to sit by my sister's bedside, and I didn't think twice about it. Janet pulled through, thank God. It was touch and go for a while, but she's a fighter. Always has been. By the end of week 3, she was stable enough that I could leave her with her daughter and come home to rest. I was exhausted. Bone deep, soul-crushing exhausted. All I wanted was to sleep in my own bed, to shower in my own bathroom, to sit in my living room with a cup of tea and just breathe. I pulled into my driveway at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The sun was shining. Birds were singing. It should have been a good day. A relief to be home. Instead, I saw my life destroyed. My clothes, my dresses, my sweaters, my underwear for God's sake, were strewn across the lawn like some kind of twisted yard sale. My books, the ones I'd collected over 40 years, were stacked in wet, warped piles near the mailbox. It had rained the night before. They were ruined. My photo albums, the only copies of pictures from my wedding, from David's childhood, from holidays and birthdays and moments I could never get back, they were scattered across the driveway, some of them torn, some of them muddy. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I sat in my car with the engine running, just staring. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe there'd been a fire? A flood? Some emergency that forced them to evacuate my things? But no. Everything was too neat. Too deliberate. My belongings had been sorted, boxed, and thrown out with purpose. I got out of the car on shaking legs. That's when I saw her. Jessica. My daughter-in-law. Standing on my porch with her arms crossed, wearing this smile that made my blood run cold. Not a nervous smile. Not an apologetic smile. A satisfied smile. Like a cat that just caught a mouse. "Oh, you're back early," she said, and there wasn't an ounce of surprise in her voice. Not a hint of shame. I couldn't speak at first. I just stood there holding a muddy photo of David's first birthday, the glass in the frame cracked down the middle. "What?" My voice came out as a whisper. I tried again. "What is this? What happened?" Jessica tilted her head like she was talking to a simple child. "We made some changes while you were gone. Your room was too nice to waste on just you, so we gave it to my mother. She's been having back problems, and she needs a proper bed. You can sleep in the storage room out back. It's not much, but it'll do." The storage room. The shed. She wanted me to sleep in the shed like I was some kind of animal. Like I was less than human. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw her clearly. This woman moved into my house 3 years ago when she and David got married. This woman I'd welcomed with open arms, who I'd helped when they couldn't make rent, who I'd cooked for and cleaned up after and tried so hard to love like a daughter. This woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. An inconvenience. "This is my house," I said quietly. "This is my house, Jessica." She laughed. Actually laughed. "It's the family house now. We all live here. And families make sacrifices. You taught David that, didn't you? So now it's your turn to sacrifice." Something inside me shifted. Something that had been bending and bending for years under the weight of trying to be a good mother, a good mother-in-law, a good person, it finally snapped. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You just made the last decision you'll ever make in my house." Her smile faltered just a little. Just enough for me to see that she'd heard the steel in my voice. But then she recovered, rolled her eyes, and went back inside, slamming my door. My door. In my house. "Before I tell you what I did next, I need you to do something for me. I need you to like this video and subscribe to this channel. I need you to comment and tell me where you're watching from, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to know that there are people out there who understand what it feels like to be betrayed by the people you love most. So please, take a second and let me know you're there. Let me know you're listening. Thank you. Now let me tell you about the worst night of my life. I walked around to the back of the house like a ghost. Everything felt surreal. Dreamlike. Nightmarish. I kept thinking I'd wake up in Janet's hospital room and this would all be just stress and exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. But no. This was real. The backyard was just as bad as the front. My gardening tools were thrown in a heap. The planters I'd carefully arranged were overturned, soil spilled everywhere, the flowers I'd babbied through the summer dead and trampled. My husband's old workbench, the one he'd built with his own hands before the cancer took him, was shoved against the fence with one leg broken. Robert. My Robert. Gone 10 years now, and I still miss him every single day. What would he say if he could see this? What would he do? I knew what he'd do. He'd have kicked them out that very second. Robert never tolerated disrespect, especially not in his own home. But Robert wasn't here. I was alone. I'd been alone for a decade, trying to be both mother and father to David, trying to hold this house together, trying to keep our little family from falling apart. And this was my reward. I made my way to the storage shed. It wasn't really a shed, more like a glorified closet with a small window. We'd used it to store holiday decorations, old furniture, and boxes of memories. Robert's golf clubs were still there. David's baby clothes. Things I couldn't bear to throw away but didn't need every day. Now it was supposed to be my bedroom. I opened the door and the musty smell hit me like a wall. There was barely room to turn around. Boxes were stacked to the ceiling on 3 sides. In the tiny space that remained, someone, Jessica, I'm sure, had thrown an old sleeping bag on the concrete floor. Not even a cot. Not even a pillow. Just a sleeping bag that smelled like mildew. This was where my son thought I should sleep. My son. My baby boy. I couldn't go back in the house. I couldn't face them. So I sat down on that concrete floor and I cried. I cried for everything I'd lost. My husband. My dignity. My son. I cried until I had no tears left, until I was just sitting there in the dark, numb and empty. As the sun went down, the temperature dropped. It was early October, and the nights were getting cold. I found an old blanket in one of the boxes, thin, moth-eaten, but better than nothing, and wrapped it around myself. I could see the lights on in my house. In my house. I could hear laughter. Jessica's mother was here, the woman who was apparently more deserving of comfort than I was, and they were all having a grand time in there while I shivered in a shed. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica's satisfied smile. I heard her calling this the family house like my name wasn't on the deed. Like I hadn't paid every single mortgage payment for the past 35 years. Like this wasn't the home I'd built with my husband, the home where I'd raised my child, the home I'd nearly killed myself working to keep after Robert died. Do you know what it's like to lose your husband and then have to figure out how to pay the bills alone? Do you know what it's like to work 2 jobs, to skip meals so your kid can have new shoes, to lie awake at night wondering if you're going to lose the house? I do. I lived it. For years, I lived it. And I kept this house. I kept it for David. So he'd always have a home to come back to. So he'd have something solid in his life, something that couldn't be taken away. And now he was taking it from me. Around midnight, as I sat there in the cold darkness, something changed in me. The grief hardened into something else. Something sharper. Anger. Pure, white-hot anger. I'd spent my entire adult life sacrificing for other people. For Robert when he got sick. For David as he grew up. For Janet these past 3 weeks. I'd given and given and given until there was nothing left of me, until I'd forgotten who I even was outside of being a wife, a mother, a caregiver. And this was how they repaid me. No. No, I wasn't going to let this stand. I wasn't going to sleep in a shed while strangers lived in my house. I wasn't going to let my son and his manipulative wife treat me like trash. I started going through the boxes around me, using my phone as a flashlight. Most of it was junk, old holiday decorations, clothes that didn't fit anymore, broken appliances I'd meant to fix or throw away. But then, in the corner, buried under a stack of winter blankets, I found it. My fireproof lockbox. I'd forgotten it was out here. After Robert died, I'd locked away all our important documents, birth certificates, insurance papers, his death certificate. Things too painful to look at but too important to throw away. I pulled it out, my hands shaking, and entered the combination. Robert's birthday. 4 numbers I'd never forget. The box clicked open. Inside were all the papers I'd hidden away from my grief. But right on top, exactly where I'd left it 10 years ago, was the deed to the house. I pulled it out and stared at it in the dim light of my phone. There it was, in black and white. The proof of ownership. And there was only one name on it. Mine. Not David's. Not Jessica's. Mine. When Robert and I bought this house, we'd put it in both our names. But when he died, it passed to me. Solely to me. David wasn't on the deed. He'd never been on the deed. This house was mine, legally and completely. I sat there holding that piece of paper, and I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Power. Control. Hope. They thought they could just take my house? They thought I was too weak, too beaten down, too much of a doormat to fight back. They were wrong. I whispered into the darkness, to no one and to myself and maybe to Robert's ghost if he was listening. I raised a son, but I created a monster. And now I'm going to stop it. I didn't sleep at all that night. As soon as the county offices opened at 8 a.m., I was in my car. I didn't even go back into the house. I couldn't stomach seeing them, couldn't trust myself not to say or do something I'd regret. The county clerk's office was dingy and fluorescent lit and smelled like old paper and stale coffee. I took a number and waited, my legs bouncing with nervous energy. When they finally called me up, I slid the deed across the counter to a bored-looking woman in her 50s. "I need certified copies of this," I said. "Several copies." She barely glanced at it. $20 per certified copy. "How many do you need?" "5, I said, and I pulled out my credit card with shaking hands. While she processed the copies, I sat back down and pulled out my phone. I started searching. Landlord-tenant laws. Property rights. Eviction procedures. I read article after article, court case after court case, until my eyes burned and my head pounded. And what I learned changed everything. In our state, if someone is living in your property without a lease, without paying rent, without any legal agreement, they're not tenants. They're called occupants or guests. And you don't need a formal eviction process to remove guests. You can demand they leave immediately. But even better than that, I learned that since David and Jessica had never paid me rent, since there was no lease agreement, since they'd been living there as family and not as legal tenants, I had options. Legal options. They had no rights to my house. None. They were living there completely at my discretion, and I could withdraw that discretion whenever I wanted. I felt dizzy with relief. With hope. With the first stirrings of justice. The clerk called my name and handed me a manila envelope with 5 certified copies of the deed. I held that envelope like it was made of gold. Next stop, a lawyer. I didn't want just any lawyer. I needed someone who understood family law, property law, and what it was like to be steamrolled by people who were supposed to love you. I searched on my phone, read reviews, and made calls. And that's how I found Margaret Matson. Margaret's office was in a renovated Victorian house downtown. It was warm and welcoming, with plants in the windows and art on the walls. Nothing like the cold corporate offices I'd imagined. When Margaret came out to meet me in the waiting room, I almost cried with relief. She was maybe 60, with silver hair cut short and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She shook my hand firmly and led me back to her office. "Tell me everything," she said, and she actually meant it. She didn't check her phone. Didn't look at the clock. Just listened. So I told her. All of it. About Robert dying. About struggling to keep the house. About David and Jessica moving in when they got married because they couldn't afford their own place. About how I'd never charged them rent because they were family and I wanted to help. About going to care for Janet. About coming home to find my belongings in the yard and being told I was going to sleep in a shed. My voice broke about halfway through, but Margaret just pushed a box of tissues across the desk and nodded for me to continue. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "Do you have the deed?" she asked. I pulled out one of the certified copies and slid it across the desk. She studied it carefully, then looked up at me. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, and her voice was fierce, "they have no legal right to be in that house. None. They're not on the deed. You never signed a lease with them. They don't pay rent. In the eyes of the law, they're guests who have overstayed their welcome. Can you help me?" I whispered. "Can I help you?" She actually smiled. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to help you take back your life. And I'm going to enjoy every second of it." She pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to draft a formal eviction notice giving them 30 days to vacate. That's more than generous. Legally, I could make it 7 days since they're not tenants, but 30 days looks better if this goes to court. Do you think it will?" "Go to court?" I think your daughter-in-law is going to fight this tooth and nail, Margaret said bluntly. People like her always do. They're used to pushing people around, and they can't believe it when someone finally pushes back. But we have the law on our side, we have the deed, and we have documentation of their behavior. If this goes to court, we'll win. I felt something loosen in my chest. Something that had been wound tight for days. When can we start? How about right now? Margaret turned to her computer and started typing. I'm going to draft this notice today, and we'll have a process server deliver it tomorrow. Do you have a place to stay? Because I don't want you sleeping in that shed again. I hadn't even thought about it. I guess I could get a hotel? My mother-in-law has a small rental property about 2 miles from here, Margaret said, still typing. It's just a studio apartment, but it's clean and furnished. She's been having trouble finding tenants, and I know she'd rent it to you for cheap. Would that work? I almost started crying again. This woman, this stranger I'd met an hour ago, was showing me more kindness than my own son had. That would be, yes. Yes, thank you. Margaret printed out a draft of the eviction notice and slid it across the desk. I read through it, and it was beautiful. Cold, legal, and absolutely airtight. It listed my full name as the sole property owner, demanded that David Patterson, Jessica Patterson, and Jessica's mother, whose name I'd had to look up on Facebook, Linda Kruger, vacate the premises within 30 days, and warned that failure to comply would result in legal action. This is perfect, I said. You haven't seen anything yet, Margaret replied, and there was something almost gleeful in her eyes. Now let's talk about damages. I saw the photos you took on your phone. Your belongings destroyed, your property damaged. We're going to document every single thing and bill them for it. And if they refuse to pay, we'll add it to the court claim. We spent the next 2 hours going through everything. Margaret had me email her all the photos I'd taken of my things scattered across the yard. She made a list of everything I could remember that was damaged or destroyed. We estimated values. We built a case. By the time I left her office, it was almost 4 p.m. I was exhausted, but I felt more like myself than I had in years. I felt like a fighter. Like someone who mattered. Margaret walked me out to my car. Mrs. Patterson, she said, I want you to know something. I had a daughter-in-law like yours once. She tried to convince my son that I was controlling and toxic. She tried to isolate him from me, manipulate him into cutting me out of his life. It took years, but he finally saw through her. They divorced, and now he and I are close again. What did you do? I asked. I stopped being afraid, Margaret said simply. I stopped walking on eggshells trying to keep the peace. I stopped sacrificing myself to make other people comfortable. And I started demanding the respect I deserved. She squeezed my shoulder. You're doing that now. It's terrifying, I know. But you're doing the right thing. I drove to the studio apartment Margaret's mother-in-law owned. It was small but clean, with a kitchenette and a bathroom and a bed with fresh sheets. There was a small table by the window and a TV on the dresser. It wasn't much, but it was warm and dry and mine for as long as I needed it. That night, I slept in a real bed for the first time in days. And I slept hard, dreamlessly, like someone who'd finally stopped fighting and started planning. The process server showed up at my house at 10 a.m. the next morning. Margaret had hired someone she used regularly, a middle-aged man named Frank who looked like somebody's kindly uncle but who could apparently serve legal papers with ruthless efficiency. I wasn't there, Margaret had advised me to stay away, but Frank called me afterward to tell me what happened. Served the papers to Jessica Patterson, he said. She was on the front porch when I arrived. She signed the receipt, read the first page, and her face went white. Then she started screaming that this was illegal, that she had rights, that her lawyer would have my badge. I informed her I don't have a badge and wished her a good day. Despite everything, I laughed. It felt good to laugh. Did my son see? I asked. There was a man visible through the front window. Couldn't tell if he saw the papers or not. But he definitely heard his wife screaming. I thanked Frank and hung up. Then I sat down at the little table in my studio apartment and waited. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang at 10:23. David. I looked at his name on the screen and felt absolutely nothing. No love. No anger. Just nothing. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again at 10:25. Again at 10:28. Again at 10:30. I turned my phone off and went to make myself lunch. That evening, I turned my phone back on to find 17 missed calls from David, 6 from Jessica, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize, probably Linda, Jessica's mother, who I'd met exactly 3 times and who'd never bothered to speak to me except to complain about something. There were also text messages. So many text messages. David, Mom, please call me. This isn't what it looks like. Jessica, you can't kick us out. This is illegal. I'm calling my lawyer. David, Mom, I didn't know she was going to do that with your stuff, I swear. Jessica, my mother has nowhere to go. You're going to make her homeless. David, please can we just talk about this? Jessica, this is elder abuse. I'm reporting you. David, Mom, I'm begging you. I read through them all with that same sense of nothingness. These words meant nothing. They were just noise. Manipulation. Desperation. I didn't respond to any of them. Margaret had advised me not to engage, and I wasn't going to start now. What I did do was block Jessica's number. Let her yell into the void. Then I called the utility companies. Hi, yes, I'm the homeowner at 247 Maple Street, and I need to make some changes to the service. The electricity stayed on. I'm not a monster. But I downgraded it to the minimum service package, enough for lights, refrigerator, and basic needs. No more running the AC all day. No more leaving every light in the house blazing. They wanted to live in my house rent-free? Fine. But they were going to live on my terms. I canceled the cable. I canceled the premium internet and downgraded to the cheapest, slowest service available. I called the streaming services and canceled them one by one. Netflix. Hulu. Disney Plus. All those accounts that I'd been paying for while they sat on my couch binging shows. Gone. Every time I canceled something, I felt a little lighter. A little more in control. The notices started arriving at the house within a few days. All of them were addressed to me, the account holder. All of them confirming the service changes. I imagined Jessica opening them, her face getting redder and redder as she realized what was happening. Good. Margaret called me a week after the eviction notice was served. How are you holding up? Better, I said, and I meant it. I'm sleeping. I'm eating. I'm not crying every day. Good. Now, I have an update. Jessica hired a lawyer. Guy named Brad Hutchins. He's called my office twice demanding we withdraw the eviction notice. My heart sank. Can he do that? He can demand all he wants, Margaret said dryly. Doesn't mean he'll get it. I looked him up. He's a personal injury lawyer who does family law on the side. Probably gave Jessica a cheap rate. He's in way over his head, and he knows it. When I explained to him that his clients have zero legal standing, he got very quiet. So what happens now? Now we wait. They have 30 days to leave. If they're not out by then, we file for a court-ordered eviction. But honestly, I think they'll leave. Jessica is a bully, but bullies fold when someone actually stands up to them. I hoped Margaret was right. But I wasn't counting on it. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2 weeks. Through Margaret, I heard updates. Linda, Jessica's mother, was complaining constantly about the conditions in the house. Too cold. The internet too slow. Nothing good on TV. She was making Jessica miserable, which made Jessica make David miserable. Part of me, the mother part, the part that had raised David and loved him for 32 years, felt bad for him. He was caught in the middle, manipulated by a woman who clearly didn't care about anyone but herself. But a bigger part of me was done making excuses for him. He was an adult. He'd made his choice. He'd chosen his wife over his mother, chosen cruelty over kindness. And now he had to live with that choice. 3 weeks into the 30 days, Margaret called me. "I think you should come into the office. There's something I want to show you." I drove over, nervous but curious. Margaret's receptionist waved me straight through to her office, where Margaret was waiting with a grin on her face. "Jessica posted this on Facebook yesterday," she said, turning her computer monitor so I could see. It was a long, rambling post about toxic family members and elder abuse and being kicked out of our home by a cruel, selfish woman who cares more about money than family. There were crying emojis. There was a plea for prayers and support. There was even a GoFundMe link asking for money to help us find a new place to live. I stared at it, feeling rage build in my chest. She's lying. She's making me sound like a monster. "Keep reading," Margaret said. I scrolled down to the comments. And that's when I saw it. Almost nobody was supporting Jessica. Instead, the comments were full of people calling her out. "Isn't that David's mom's house? Why would she kick you out unless you did something? Girl, you literally posted last month about redecorating your MIL's room while she was away. Did you ask her first? This sounds like there's more to the story. If you can't afford rent, maybe you shouldn't be redecorating other people's houses." And my personal favorite, from someone who'd apparently gone to high school with Jessica. "Jessica, you've been mooching off people your whole life. Not surprised this finally caught up with you." I looked up at Margaret, and we both started laughing. Really laughing, the kind of laughter that's half relief and half disbelief. "She tried to make herself the victim," Margaret said, "and it completely backfired. People aren't stupid. They can read between the lines." "What do I do about this?" I asked. "Should I respond? Set the record straight?" "Absolutely not," Margaret said firmly. "Never engage. It's what she wants, a public fight she can screenshot and use as evidence that you're unstable or abusive. Just let her dig her own grave. She's doing a fantastic job of it." So I didn't respond. I just took screenshots of everything in case we needed it later and went on with my life. But I did post something on my own Facebook page. Just one sentence. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is set boundaries. Within an hour, I had 50 likes and a dozen comments from old friends telling me they were proud of me, that I was brave, that I was doing the right thing. It felt good to be seen. To be supported. To know I wasn't alone. The 30 days were almost up when Margaret called me one last time before the court date. "They're not leaving," she said. "I got a call from Brad Hutchins. He's advising them to stay put and fight this in court. He thinks he can argue that they have squatters' rights or some nonsense about family contribution to the household. Can he win?" My voice came out small and scared. "Not a chance in hell," Margaret said. "But it means we're going to court. I need you to be prepared for that. It's going to be uncomfortable. David and Jessica will be there. Linda probably will too. They're going to say things about you, try to paint you as the villain. I need you to stay calm, stay quiet, and let me do the talking. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said, and I meant it. I'd come this far. I wasn't backing down now. The court date was set for 2 days later. Thursday morning, 9 a.m. I barely slept the night before. I kept running through everything in my head, imagining what they'd say, how they'd try to twist the truth. I imagined David looking at me with betrayal in his eyes. I imagined Jessica smirking, thinking she'd already won. But I also imagined Margaret standing up in that courtroom, calm and professional, and laying out the facts. The deed. The law. The proof that I was the victim here, not them. I held on to that image like a lifeline. The courthouse was gray and imposing, with metal detectors at the entrance and security guards who looked like they'd seen it all and were tired of it. Margaret met me in the lobby, immaculate in a charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my car. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." We went through security and made our way to courtroom 3B. It was smaller than I'd expected, with wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lights that buzzed quietly. There were rows of benches for observers, a table for each side, and the judge's bench at the front. Jessica, David, and Linda were already there, huddled with Brad Hutchins at the defendant's table. Jessica was wearing a black dress that was probably supposed to make her look somber and sympathetic but just made her look like she was going to a funeral. Linda had her arm in a sling. I'd bet money that was new, probably part of their "we're so fragile and victimized" act. David wouldn't look at me. He just stared at the table, his shoulders hunched. Margaret and I sat at the plaintiff's table. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents, arranging them neatly in front of her. Everything about her screamed competence and confidence. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Martinez." We all stood as the judge entered. She was a black woman, maybe 55, with gray at her temples and an expression that said she had no patience for nonsense. She sat, we sat, and she looked down at the papers in front of her. "This is a summary eviction hearing for property located at 247 Maple Street," she said. "The plaintiff is Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, represented by Ms. Margaret Matson. The defendants are Mr. David Patterson, Mrs. Jessica Patterson, and Mrs. Linda Kruger, represented by Mr. Brad Hutchins. Ms. Matson, you may begin." Margaret stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. This is a straightforward case of property rights. Mrs. Patterson is the sole owner of the property in question, as evidenced by this deed." She handed a copy to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "The defendants have been living in her home without a lease, without paying rent, and without any legal right to occupy the property. When Mrs. Patterson returned from caring for her ill sister, she found that the defendants had taken over her bedroom, destroyed and removed her belongings, and attempted to relegate her to a storage shed. Mrs. Patterson served the defendants with a 30-day eviction notice, which they have refused to honor. We're asking the court to order their immediate removal from the property and to award damages for the destruction of Mrs. Patterson's belongings." Judge Martinez studied the deed, then looked up. "Mr. Hutchins?" Brad Hutchins stood. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with a cheap suit and nervous energy. "Your Honor, the defendants are family. David Patterson is Mrs. Patterson's son. This is his childhood home. He and his wife have been living there for 3 years, contributing to the household, helping with maintenance, and caring for the property while Mrs. Patterson was away. To suddenly evict them without warning, to destroy the family unit. Did they pay rent?" Judge Martinez interrupted. "Well, no, but..." "Was there a lease agreement?" "No, Your Honor, but they were living there as family." "So they were guests," the judge said flatly. "Guests who the property owner has now asked to leave." "Your Honor, if I may," Brad said desperately, "my client's mother has serious health issues. She has nowhere else to go. To evict her would be..." "Is her name on the deed?" Judge Martinez asked. "No, but..." "Was she paying rent?" No, Your Honor, but. Then she's also a guest. Judge Martinez looked back down at her papers. Ms. Matson, you mentioned damages? Margaret stood again. Yes, Your Honor. We have extensive photographic evidence of Mrs. Patterson's belongings being destroyed and thrown into the yard. Clothing, books, photo albums, furniture, items of both monetary and sentimental value. We estimate the damages at approximately $15,000. Jessica made a noise, half gasp, half laugh. That's insane. Those were old clothes and junk. Judge Martinez's head snapped up. Mrs. Patterson, you will not speak unless directly addressed by the court. If you do so again, I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand? Jessica's face went red, but she nodded. Mr. Hutchins, the judge continued, do your clients dispute that they removed Mrs. Patterson's belongings from her room? Brad whispered with Jessica for a moment, then stood. They acknowledge that they moved some items, Your Honor, but they claim it was to make better use of the space. Did they have permission to do so? Mrs. Patterson was away. That's not what I asked. Did they have her permission? Brad hesitated. No, Your Honor. Judge Martinez sat back in her chair and looked at all of us. Her expression was not sympathetic. Let me make something very clear, she said. I see cases like this far too often. Family members who think that because they're related to someone, they have a right to that person's property. They don't. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson is the sole legal owner of this property. She has the absolute right to decide who lives there and who doesn't. The defendants have no lease, pay no rent, and therefore have no legal claim to residency. She looked directly at David. Mr. Patterson, I understand you're her son. But that doesn't give you ownership rights to your mother's house. Do you understand that? David finally looked up. His eyes were red, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years. Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Jessica Patterson. The judge turned her attention to my daughter-in-law. Did you authorize the removal and destruction of Mrs. Patterson's belongings? Jessica lifted her chin defiantly. I was making room for my mother. She needed. That's not what I asked. Did you have Mrs. Patterson's permission? Silence. Answer the question, Mrs. Patterson. No, Jessica finally said. But she wasn't there, and we needed. What you need is irrelevant. It's not your house. Judge Martinez looked back down at her papers and started writing. The scratching of her pen was the only sound in the courtroom. Finally, she looked up. Here's my ruling. The defendants will vacate the premises at 247 Maple Street within 7 days. Not 30 days. 7. If they fail to do so, the sheriff will remove them and their belongings. The defendants are ordered to pay Mrs. Patterson $15,000 in damages for destruction of her property, with payment to be made within 60 days or wages garnished as necessary. The defendants have no legal claim to the property and are prohibited from returning to it without Mrs. Patterson's express written permission. Is that clear? Your Honor, Brad tried one more time. 7 days is not enough time to find. Mr. Hutchins, your clients had 30 days' notice. They chose to ignore it. 7 days is more than generous. If they end up on the street, they have only themselves to blame. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. And just like that, it was over. Jessica stood up so fast her chair fell over. This is bullshit. This is. Mrs. Patterson. The judge hadn't left yet. One more word and you'll be spending the night in a cell for contempt. Do you understand? Jessica clamped her mouth shut, but her eyes were shooting daggers at everyone in the room. Margaret calmly packed up her briefcase. I just sat there, shaking. I'd won. I'd actually won. As we stood to leave, David suddenly rushed over to me. "Mom, please, can we just talk?" Jessica didn't mean. "Don't," I said quietly. "Just don't, David." She was just trying to help. Her mom needed. "At my expense," I said. "She threw my life into the yard and told me to sleep in a shed. And you let her. You stood by and let her do that to me." "I didn't know she was going to." "You knew," I said, and my voice broke. "You knew, and you didn't stop her. You didn't call me. You didn't warn me. You just let it happen." David's face crumpled. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was weak, I was." "You were complicit," I said. "And now you have 7 days to get out of my house. Permanently." I walked past him, past Jessica who was arguing in furious whispers with Brad, past Linda who was crying fake tears into a tissue. I walked out of that courtroom with Margaret at my side, and I didn't look back. Outside in the hallway, I finally let myself feel it. The relief. The victory. The grief. "You did it," Margaret said softly. "You got your house back." "I lost my son," I whispered. "You lost the person he became," Margaret corrected. "The son you raised is still in there somewhere. Maybe this will wake him up. Maybe it won't. But either way, you did the right thing." She drove me back to the studio apartment. We sat in her car for a while, not talking, just breathing. "What happens now?" I finally asked. "Now you give them 7 days to move out. I'll arrange for a police escort on day 7 to make sure they actually leave and don't try to pull anything. And then you change the locks and go home." "Home? My home? Mine again. And the damages?" "They'll pay, even if I have to garnish every paycheck from now until doomsday. Jessica's working part-time at some retail place, and David's in IT. They have income. They'll pay." "Margaret," I said, "I can't thank you enough. For everything. For believing me. For fighting for me." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Eleanor, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen a lot of cases. But this one? This one mattered. Not because of the money or the property. Because you stood up for yourself. You remembered who you were. That's worth fighting for." The next 7 days were surreal. I kept expecting to wake up and find out it was all a dream. But it was real. The court order was real. My victory was real. On day 3, I drove past the house, not stopping, just driving by. There was a moving truck in the driveway. Boxes on the porch. They were actually leaving. On day 5, Margaret called. "David wants to talk to you. He's asking if he can call." "No," I said immediately. "Eleanor." "No. Not yet. I can't. Maybe someday, but not yet. It's too fresh. It hurts too much." "Okay," Margaret said gently. "That's okay. You get to decide when you're ready." On day 7, I met Margaret at the house. She'd arranged for 2 police officers to be present, just in case. But when we arrived at noon, the moving truck was gone. The driveway was empty. They'd left. I got out of the car slowly, my legs shaking. Margaret and the officers followed me to the front door. I used my key, in my door, and opened it. The house was empty. Not completely. The furniture I'd owned before David moved in was still there. The couch, the dining table, the TV. But everything else was gone. Jessica's decorations. David's computer setup. Linda's medical equipment. I walked through each room like I was seeing it for the first time. The kitchen was relatively clean. The living room had some dust but nothing terrible. But when I got to what had been my bedroom, the room Jessica had stolen, I stopped. It was trashed. The walls had holes in them where Jessica had apparently ripped down pictures or decorations. The carpet was stained. The closet door was off its hinges. And on the bed, my bed, was a shattered vase. The vase Robert had given me on our 10th anniversary. The one piece of him I'd treasured more than anything. Broken. Deliberately broken, glass scattered across the bedspread like she'd thrown it down with force. I picked up the largest piece, a curve of blue ceramic that had once been the vase's rim, and I felt something inside me crack too. Eleanor? Margaret was behind me, her voice concerned. She broke it, I whispered. She broke the last thing I had of him. Margaret came over and gently took the glass from my hand. Come on. Let's look at the rest of the house. Then we'll decide what to do. We finished the walkthrough. The damage wasn't extensive, just my bedroom, really, and some scratches on the hardwood floors where they'd dragged furniture. Nothing I couldn't fix. But in the kitchen, I found something that made me stop again. A note. On the counter, weighted down by a salt shaker. I recognized David's handwriting immediately. I picked it up with trembling hands. Mom. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I'm so sorry. I let Jessica control everything. I let her make me believe that what she wanted was more important than what was right. I let her convince me that you were being difficult, that you didn't understand, that you owed us something. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to show it. I forgot who you were. I forgot who I was. Jessica and I are separating. She's gone to live with her mother in another state. I'm staying here in town. I got an apartment. I'm going to therapy. I'm going to figure out how I became someone who could hurt you like this. I hope someday you can look at me again. I hope someday I can earn back even a fraction of your trust. But if I can't, I understand. I deserve this. All of it. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I forgot to show it. David. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. What does it say? Margaret asked. That he's sorry, I said. That he's leaving her. That he wants forgiveness someday. And I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I should. He's my son, but he hurt me. He let someone hurt me. How do you come back from that? Time, Margaret said. Time and boundaries and therapy and a lot of hard work. Maybe you forgive him someday. Maybe you don't. But that's a decision for future Eleanor. Today Eleanor just needs to reclaim her space. She was right. We spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning. Margaret had insisted on staying, and the police officers even helped haul some trash out before they had to leave. We swept up the glass from the vase. We patched the holes in the walls with spackles. We scrubbed and vacuumed and aired out the rooms. By evening, the house looked lived in again. Loved again. Margaret ordered pizza and we sat at my kitchen table, eating straight from the box because I was too tired to get plates. What now? I asked. What do I do with all this space? All this quiet? Whatever you want, Margaret said. That's the point, Eleanor. It's your house. Your life. You get to decide. We finished eating as the sun set, the light coming through the kitchen windows turning everything golden. Margaret helped me make up the guest room bed. I wasn't ready to sleep in my old room yet, not with the memories of finding it violated still so fresh. I should go, Margaret said around 9. Let you get settled. But I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Make sure you're doing all right. Margaret, I said as she gathered her things, why did you do all this? I mean, I know you're my lawyer, but you went above and beyond. You stayed all day helping me clean. You introduced me to your mother-in-law's rental. You've been a friend. Margaret smiled. I told you about my daughter-in-law from hell, right? How did she try to turn my son against me? I nodded. When I was going through that, I felt so alone. Like I was going crazy. Like maybe I was the problem. And then I found a lawyer who listened to me. Who believed me. Who helped me see that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't toxic, I was just being abused. She put her hand on my shoulder. She saved my life, Eleanor. Literally. I was in such a dark place. And she pulled me out. So when I became a lawyer myself, I promised I'd do the same for other women. I'd be that person who listens. Who believes. Who fights. I hugged her then, hard, and she hugged me back. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for trusting me, she replied. After she left, I walked through my house one more time. My house. My space. My refuge. It was quiet. So quiet after years of David and Jessica filling it with noise and drama and tension. I sat on the couch, my couch, and I let myself cry. Not from sadness. Not from anger. Just from release. From the sheer exhaustion of fighting and winning and losing and surviving. And then I wiped my eyes, made myself a cup of tea, and sat on my front porch as the stars came out. It's been 3 months now. 3 months since I won my house back. 3 months since David left that note. I've started redecorating. Slowly. Room by room. Painting walls colors I like instead of the neutral beiges David and Jessica insisted on. Hanging art I choose. Arranging furniture the way I want it. My bedroom, the one Jessica destroyed, took the longest. I had to replace the carpet. Repaint. Buy a new bed because I couldn't stand sleeping in the one she'd contaminated. But now it's mine again. Truly mine. And when I sleep there, I sleep peacefully. The vase is still broken. I gathered all the pieces and put them in a beautiful wooden box. I can't repair it, there are too many tiny fragments missing, but I couldn't throw it away either. Robert's gift. Robert's love. Even broken, it matters. Margaret and I have become real friends. She comes over for dinner once a week. We drink wine and talk about everything and nothing. She's been dating someone, a retired teacher who makes her laugh, and watching her face light up when she talks about him makes me happy. I haven't spoken to David yet. He's called. He's texted. Always respectful, never demanding. Just there. Waiting. Part of me wants to reach out. Part of me misses my son desperately. But another part of me is still too hurt, too angry, too afraid of being disappointed again. Maybe someday. But not today. Jessica, I heard through the grapevine, is exactly where she belongs. Living with her mother in a tiny apartment in another state, working retail, complaining on Facebook about how unfair her life is. She hasn't paid a cent of the $15,000 she owes me. Margaret's in the process of garnishing her wages. It'll take years, but I'll get every penny. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did. If I wish I'd just let them stay, keep the peace, be the bigger person. And I tell them no. Absolutely not. Because here's what I learned, setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. Demanding respect doesn't make you selfish. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you a monster. I spent so many years making myself smaller so other people could be comfortable. Sacrificing so others didn't have to. Accepting less than I deserved because I was afraid of being alone or being seen as difficult or being unloved. But you know what? Being alone in a house that's truly mine is better than being surrounded by people who treat me like trash. Being seen as difficult by people who want to use me is better than being a doormat. And being loved conditionally isn't being loved at all. I'm 63 years old. I'm a widow. I'm estranged from my only child. By society's standards, I should be lonely and sad and full of regrets. But I'm not. I'm free. Free to paint my walls purple if I want. Free to eat cereal for dinner. Free to leave dishes in the sink overnight. Free to fill my house with plants or art or absolutely nothing at all. Free to be myself without apology. And that freedom? That's worth everything I lost to get it. So if you're watching this and you're in a situation like I was, if someone is using you, disrespecting you, treating your kindness like weakness, I want you to hear this. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You are not required to tolerate abuse because it comes from family. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to have boundaries. You are allowed to demand the respect you deserve. And if people can't accept that? If they call you selfish or cruel or heartless? Let them. Their opinions don't pay your bills. Their judgments don't own your property. Their disappointment in you doesn't dictate your worth. You are enough. Just as you are. And you deserve a life where you're treated like you matter. Because you do matter. More than you know. Before I go, I want to ask you something. I want you to like this video. I want you to subscribe to this channel. And I want you to comment below and tell me where you're watching from. But more than that, I want you to tell me your story. If you've been through something like this, if you've had to stand up to family, if you've had to choose yourself over people who were supposed to love you, I want to hear about it. Because we're not alone. None of us are alone. And sometimes, knowing someone else survived gives you the strength to survive too. So comment. Share. Tell your truth. And remember, you are worth fighting for. Even if you have to be the one doing the fighting. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And thank you for reminding me that I'm not alone either.